Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
It's more the scale of the thing. People are using chains of 4 effects at a time across multiple pipelines. One of the features of AudioBus is that you can have multiple ports, they're called, multiple ports coming into or out of a single app. So Loopy, my app, for example, has 12 ports. It has one for each track and a master. So people are targeting individual tracks in Loopy and applying effects per track on them through AudioBus and then routing them into multi-track recorders. And it's amazing to see the sophistication of this system.
Welcome to iPad Pros. I hope everyone is enjoying iOS 12 and some of the really impressive Siri shortcuts I've seen so far. Before introducing our guest today, I just wanted to share a couple of really cool shortcuts I've found and a quick tip for those having problems getting Siri shortcuts into the Shortcuts app. First up, for those with the Nest thermostat, I'd really recommend looking into getting Thermo Watch. It's a great application for iPad, iPhone, and the Apple Watch. The app has a bunch of shortcuts to finally allow you to control your Nest with Siri and integrate it into larger shortcuts. The Apple Watch app is really impressive. It's got some newly updated complications for the Series 4, and the app itself is just fantastic. New audio-related ones to check out: Overcast for podcast control, and Pandora Radio has some Siri shortcut integrations as well, which is really cool to see non-Apple Music apps get into Siri shortcuts. And they've also announced, along with this update, that a Watch app is coming very soon, which is really exciting to see. Audible recently updated their app to support the Apple Watch, and it's really cool to see all of those updates come as well. Yoink version 2 is very close to release. It's in test flight with the GM in test flight, but it'll soon be released to the public with a very advanced list of Siri shortcuts that really makes Yoink more than just a shelf app, but one of the most powerful third-party clipboards for iOS, enabling you to grab the last image you put in the Yoink and things of that nature. Developer thought of some really interesting implementations for Siri shortcuts that brings a lot of flexibility and the power into Yoink. So check out Yoink, especially when that version 2 update hits the App Store. So there's a lot more to share for Siri shortcuts, but I'll save those for another day. If you do have a favorite shortcut, please send that to me at iPadProsPodcast@gmail.com. Now for a quick tip for those using shortcuts. If you can't find a Siri shortcut that you create in the Shortcuts app, I'd recommend running the Siri shortcut at least once outside the initial setup. Apparently creating the shortcut isn't enough, but you also have to run it at least once for it to show up in the Shortcuts app, so give that a shot. And then finally, last up, before introducing our guest, I just want to remind everyone that if you'd like to support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com/iPadPros. Your support there means the world to me. And also, if you haven't had a chance to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, that would be greatly appreciated as well. Now I have the privilege of introducing our guest who helped influence Apple's own APIs for inter-app audio. Michael Tyson is the creator and developer behind the popular inter-app audio engine known as AudioBus, which is both an app and an API. The AudioBus app is now at version 3, and in this interview, we talk about its evolution over the years, which for those that forget was back in 2011, in the very beginning of the iPad. We also talk about the app's future and what to expect next. AudioBus is an incredibly powerful tool for musicians creating content on iOS. Without further delay, here's my interview with Michael. Enjoy. I'm here today with Michael Tyson of AudioBus. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
First off, can you introduce yourself and what AudioBus is?
I'm a audio developer. I wasn't always in audio, but it's been my passion pretty much the whole time. I did a bachelor in computer science, that's sort of my background, and then I started a PhD in networking, of all things. I'm ashamed to say about maybe 75% of the way through, I thought, I'd like to try developing an app, and that's when I made Loopy, when I should have been working on the PhD. Well, kind of the rest is history. The hobby turned into the career, which is one of those rare, amazing things that can happen to a person. So Loopy was my first app, and that's a live looper where you can, record and then play back a loop of the recording you just did, and layer up recordings and make nice little sort of songs. I grew up playing jazz trombone, actually, and I play a bit of guitar now, but it's taken a massive backseat to the actual development. I made Loopy because I wanted to have a live looper to play with. But as soon as it was finished, I didn't play with it. I just kept on working on it. So I'm sort of a second auto musician.
So let's dive into what AudioBus actually is.
So AudioBus, just for a brief bit of background, it came about through some email exchanges with users of Loopy, actually. I would get emails from people saying, I've got a guitar amp simulator and I want to be able to loop my guitar through the guitar amp. When I use Loopy, all I'm getting is the clean signal. And that was obvious to me because there was no way to send audio from one app to another. After a few, you just can't do that kind of answers, I started thinking, well, why not? And I started messing around with some prototypes to see if I could make it work. And yeah, I made a prototype that actually did the job. So what AudioBus does is it acts like virtual set of audio cables. So you can connect one app to another app and record the output, or use one app to affect the output from another app, and you can build them into these sort of nice little complex chains of audio processing. So when it came out in 2011, it kind of made a lot of these apps which were really just toys. You might have a beautiful synthesizer, but unless you can use it in a wider context, it doesn't really get you very much. What AudioBus did was allow all of these things to be used as part of like a virtual studio, basically.
And I want to emphasize, 2011 is when this happened. This was, the iPad was released in 2010. So this is really early on in just iPad existence.
Yeah, it came along at a good time.
So 2011 it came out. How's it evolved over the years? We're now at version 3. What happened in the version 1.x updates and version 2?
The very first version, it only allowed you to have one pipeline. So you can have one, maybe a few other inputs going into one effect and then going into one output. So it was quite limited. And since then, one of the big features in AudioBus 2 was that we added multi-routing, where you could have more than one pipeline. And this is where the surprise factor came in. The kind of use cases that people started using with this multi-routing add-on were just amazing. And so now people are using these really complicated setups, which blows my mind. So AudioBus 2 was mostly about multi-routing and saving presets. It also introduced state saving, which was a really big feature which allowed you to, as a developer, provide AudioBus with whatever data forms the current session, and then users can load it again later, and it loads into all of the different apps that you're using, which is something that was never possible before. That was a big one in AudioBus 2. And then 3 was another really big update. AudioBus 3 introduced MIDI, which lets you use various generator apps like arpeggiators and sequencers and things to drive other instruments. It's really opened up a whole new interesting ways of making music. And then the work that I've been doing in the last 6 months or so is to sort of push it to the next level, to add support for the new audio unit MIDI standard, which is an amazing thing to work with. It's the future of iOS music. They're great. And after iOS 11, Apple introduced the ability for audio units to be MIDI generators. So there's a fantastic new set of sequencers and arpeggiators and just wonderful new toys that AudioBus 3 now works with really well. And yeah, it continues on. I'm working hard on the next version, which is going to introduce being able to control everything in the app and all of the apps that are part of the session with a MIDI controller. So be able to, twiddle knobs and have some effect changes, parameters. It's going to really make it a lot more fun live.
Yeah, so hardware support. External hardware support.
Yes.
And right now there is no external hardware component to this right now, right?
That's right. It's very limited. It does integrate quite nicely with multi-channel audio hardware. So you can, take a couple of different apps and send them out to different channels and things. So it's fun for integrating into a bigger studio setup, but as far as actually controlling it, it doesn't have much of that yet. So that's next.
In the current iteration, would an app that supports AudioBus that also supports a MIDI keyboard work with this?
Yeah, MIDI keyboards as in notes, they already work in AudioBus and have done since AudioBus 3.
Okay.
And that works really beautifully. You can use, MIDI guitars, MIDI keyboards, and now with Bluetooth in the latest version, you can use Bluetooth keyboards.
That just blows my mind, Bluetooth MIDI. In college, I would have dreamed for stuff like that.
Yeah, I got a Bluetooth keyboard quite recently. I can't put the thing down. I love it.
So you mentioned with AudioBus 2, all these really impressive setups that people start building. Can you describe some of these things that kind of surprised you that people were actually doing with the app?
It's more the scale of the thing. People are using chains of 4 effects at a time across multiple pipelines. One of the features of AudioBus is that you can have multiple ports, they're called, multiple ports coming into or out of a single app. So Loopy, my app, for example, has 12 ports. It has one for each track and a master. So people are targeting individual tracks in Loopy and applying effects per track on them through AudioBus, and then routing them into multi-track recorders. And it's amazing to see the sophistication of this system.
And there's over 1,000 apps that are now in support of AudioBus and use the APIs, which I don't know when you started this if you thought it would get that large as far as just the support out there.
We certainly hoped, and we did a lot of reaching out to developers, but maybe right place, right time, but it really took off, and it's been fabulous.
One of the apps that supported it was GarageBand. Did you know about that before that got announced? Or what was that like to see that on stage?
Very briefly. Very briefly we knew about it. I think that was one of the really big factors that propelled it into the mainstream. That kind of acceptance by Apple was instrumental in encouraging others that it's okay to climb aboard. It was mind-blowing, just amazing, and really wonderful to know that Apple are that supportive. There's a lot of... Apple's a very black box sometimes, and it's sort of hard to know what goes in and what the people are like. And from our experiences, really, really nice, creative, collaborative people.
How does the GarageBand support work?
Just audio into GarageBand. They've not added what was sending from GarageBand out, and I don't think they will. But GarageBand works as a recorder.
Gotcha. So AudioBus works on two levels. We just mentioned the API that GarageBand's using, and it's an app itself. What is the actual app, and what's the API? Like, what's the difference between all of that?
So the app is what the users see, and it is basically the control center. The API is a piece of code that developers can get for free, and they can build into their apps. And what it does is it facilitates communication with AudioBus. Some interesting little historical information. It originally worked over my own audio protocol, which was built on something that Apple subsequently closed down for security reasons. In iOS 7, they shut it down. Unfortunately, they gave us some warning so we could work around it. But originally, it did all of the communication. Since then, it's actually using Apple's own inter-app audio system with some bits on top. One of those bits that floats on top is the connection panel, which is well loved. It's a panel that sits at the side of every app that's part of the current AudioBus session, and it lets you access all of the controls for all of the other apps. So, record buttons, play buttons, lots of other sort of app-specific functions that developers can provide, and they'll show up in the connection panel. You've got this little sort of remote control for the rest of the apps in your session, and that's one of the things the API does.
Okay. And you just mentioned that there is actually an official inter-app audio API by Apple themselves. How does that actually work?
So what it does is it establishes a communication between the two apps, and there's a third-party server, a bit like AudioBus, that facilitates the movement of audio from one app to the other. So what an app is acting as an audio receiver does is it hosts the audio generator. So say you're in GarageBand and you want to have a synthesizer in. So you host the synthesizer and it launches that into the background. So you don't actually see the app launch. It just all happens seamlessly, which is an advantage that it had over the original AudioBus, which we couldn't do just because we weren't the operating system. And then it will send audio for the duration of the session. And then when you're done, you close it out and it closes the app in the background. In theory, it doesn't always,
which
is why sometimes it can get a bit frustrating. It doesn't work perfectly. And this is one of the reasons I'm really thrilled that Apple have come up with the audio unit V3 standard audio unit extensions, which are really what it should have been from the beginning, and they're fantastic. They work a little bit differently. It's a lot more robust, the architecture. There's a lot less sort of moving parts that all have to work exactly right.
Gotcha. And all these APIs have been, up until now and still, really designed for musicians rather than, say, spoken word and things like what I'm doing, right?
Yes, definitely. Apple have always been very creativity focused with design and music and stuff. And so, yeah, this comes from their sort of music background.
And did you ever experiment with trying to get VoIP apps like on board with AudioBus? I know it was never part of your core mission with the music creation, but it's definitely a need out there for a certain audience.
Yeah, we'd always hoped that some of those would get on board, but I think hoped is probably too strong a word. The problem is, I mean, Apple were a fantastic exception, but big companies generally tend not to take risks like that, like in interacting with smaller fish, as it were. So we never really expected Skype or anyone like that to get on board.
And there really aren't any small VoIP companies out there really to speak of, I should say.
There's Viber and there's WhatsApp and there's all of these things, but I don't think it was ever really on their radar, and we never really had much hope that they would get on board there.
Yeah, just curious. I'd imagine there are some use cases of do singers use AudioBus and affect their sound in any way? Is that a use case of the app at all?
Yes, absolutely. There are heaps. Yeah, I mean, there's everything from auto-tune to limiters and compressors to EQ, and there's a massive range of things. And yes, definitely, vocalists do use it for applying chains of effects like that.
Now, what are some of your favorite AudioBus apps?
It's funny, lately my favorites are geared towards the MIDI creation. Perhaps that's because it's what I've been working on. But I've always been a really big fan of Fugue Machine, which I think is just a wonderful concept. There's an app that was featured by Apple recently as well. And the idea of a fugue is to have a theme, a very simple theme of maybe even a few notes, and you sort of produce variations on that theme by inverting it or playing it half speed, double speed, and layering them. It's something that I want to say Bach did a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, my classical theory is not very solid.
No, that is accurate.
But
Bach
Fugue,
did quite a few.
Oh, good. Excellent, yeah. So Fugue Machine is an implementation of that. So it's this great UI where you can have, you draw in segments on the screen, your notes, and then there are 4 playheads, and the playheads can go, they can bounce back and forth, they can play forward, they can play backwards, all different speeds. And with AudioBus 3, you can send each playhead out to a different app. So you can have a piano or a brass synthesizer or anything you want. You can send a playhead to each different one and have them all playing together. So it's really fun to play with. The other two, which I'm really enjoying lately, are audio units. There's the Rosetta suite by Bram Bos, which I adore. It's very fun. There's a lot of different tools. There's arpeggiators and there's bassline generators and drum synths. It doesn't make any sound. You send it out to the sound generator that you want. So I've been having a lot of fun with that. And there's Step Poly Arp as well, which is another sequencer and arpeggiator, which I've been having a lot of fun making covers of The Wheels on the Bus go round and round for the AudioBus promo videos.
So outside of the AudioBus app itself, there's also an app called AudioBus Remote. How does that work?
This is one that I wanted to make for a long time, and we ended up getting another developer, Gabriel, to build it. It's an app that lets you over Bluetooth, and it also works on the same device in split screen. It connects to AudioBus as a remote control. So if you have a second iPad or an iPhone, or you can use it as a second screen for AudioBus, basically. So developers can, in the same way they can provide controls for the AudioBus connection panel, that's the panel that shows on the side of the screen, they can do AudioBus remote triggers as well. And that's a larger set of controls for their app. So you basically get a screen full of buttons and you can control all the apps that you use. An example is with Loopy, for example. I added buttons for every loop. So you tap one of these buttons and it will toggle the loop on and off. You can use it on a separate device, and the setup is great. Really pleased with how that came together. You just hold the two devices together and it just connects. It's the most magical thing. There's no setup. You just go bam and they're connected.
It's kind of like the old Palm tap to beam over, right?
Yeah. A little bit of magic. Yeah. So it works on another device, but you can also use it split screen, which is quite fun. So you can have, your app there, and then you've got, it's like having a bigger connection panel, basically.
So it uses a different part of the API to surface different controls than the main app would.
It does, yeah.
And has support for that been pretty widespread? Is that something that's taken a bit to get developers up to speed with?
I think it probably depends who you ask. There have definitely been some apps that haven't adopted it that we would like to, but I think adoption has been fairly good. Yeah, there's been quite a lot of support, and people definitely do use it to great effect. So yeah, it's been quite good.
And it sounds like to me it's almost like a performance tool you're performing on your iOS devices, and the remote app sounds like a pretty key part to pulling off a really good performance.
That was part of the idea, just to kind of limit the resistance of having to interact with little controls and things, which is, of course, very important when you're playing live. You don't want to have to sort of squint at little bits and pieces and switch back and forth between apps. So it facilitates a lot more ease of use.
Coming up with iOS 13 and beyond, what kind of iOS limitations do you hope get lifted to make your app and API work even better?
As far as limitations go, I feel like with audio units, I think we've really got to a point where we're really cooking with gas as far as music goes. I really like the new feature set. And I don't think there's a great deal more that I would ask. The one thing that I would like to see move forward is the stability factor. I know that that's a big focus with iOS 12, and it remains to be seen how well that's been accomplished. But there have been a number of fairly irritating problems with inter-app audio in particular, which has been a bit of a thorn in my side because we started with AudioBus and it was my own system, and if there was a problem I could fix it. With inter-app audio, of course, it was anything but. It was just trying to figure out how to work around the problems that were there. And to their credit, the audio team at Apple have been very responsive and proactive at trying to nail stuff down, but we just haven't really made a lot of headway in a lot of the problems with inter-app audio, which is why I'm so excited about audio units, because I think that's the future and it really does work very well. So more of that is what I want to see. I want to see this stuff be really robust. I want it to be able to be used, on big stages without anyone feeling nervous.
With the upcoming version, how does the hardware support work? Are you going to be able to program this knob talks to this software dial in your app, and how granular will that get?
I'm really excited about it, actually. I've been mocking it up for the last couple of weeks, and I've just started digging into actually writing the code, and it's going to be great. It actually pulls together some code from Loopy Pro, which is this fabled project which I announced about 4 years ago, which I'm still working on. I'm kind of glad to see some of its code gets to see the light of day in this. But the way it's going to work is there'll be this great MIDI learn interface where you tap a button on the toolbar and it'll go into MIDI learn mode, where you'll be able to see various elements that you can interact with. And say you tap on an audio unit that you've got hosted, you'll then be able to see a little list of things that you can bind to. So there'll be toggling mute or bypass. If it's an effect, you'll be able to adjust the gain. And then you'll be able to go in and actually bind to individual parameters of the audio unit. So that's entirely up to the developer of the audio unit, but there's, I think, fairly good adoption of this standard. So you'll be able to go and bind a particular knob on your MIDI controller to a particular parameter of an EQ or something. You'll be able to bind to almost anything in there. And I'm going to be able to use some of the more advanced features that are planned for Loopy Pro in there, like doing more than one thing with a single action. So you'll be able to have a pad that you can tap and it will, say, toggle 3 effects all at once. So there'll be a lot of power in how you can control it.
And it'll support one hardware accessory at a time, or have you looked into, you have a Bluetooth controller and you have a USB one, or how's that all going to work?
Yes, it'll do more than one, and it'll be able to save the configurations into the AudioBus preset, so you can have different setups for different songs that you might have put together, or so it'll be quite flexible. I'm quite looking forward to having a play with it. And it's going to do MIDI sync as well. So my focus is really getting this on stage and in studios in a way that's as seamless as possible.
Yeah. The iPad, does it support like a USB hub? Where what kind of thresholds are we talking about with the hardware?
I have no idea, but it's just standard MIDI. So it's just standard USB. So I can't imagine it would struggle with anything that a computer. A lot of these devices, my phone is now more powerful than my MacBook Pro, so it blows my mind. But as far as I know, there aren't any unreasonable, shall we say, limits. You can plug in pretty much whatever you want. So you can have an audio interface, you can have several MIDI controllers. Then there's, of course, Bluetooth as well.
Foot pedals, I'd imagine, would be an interesting accessory.
Yeah, that'll be great for bypassing effects and such. You'll be able to use them for, all sorts of fun things.
Well, with that, as far as where people can find more information about AudioBus and the support apps, where can people go for that?
Our website is AudioBus, audiob.us, and that's where you can sort of see various tutorial videos and things. We've got the AudioBus forum, which I need to make a major shout out to. The AudioBus forum is this amazing community of developers. It's been said that it's sort of the mecca of iOS development. It's where most people go to talk about everything iOS development, not just AudioBus. So check out the AudioBus forum. That's forum.audiob.us, forum.audiobus. And there's my work is Loopy as well, loopyapp.com, and I've also got a new app in the pipeline. That's SampleBot. Just Google that one. That's a new app that was released recently for a Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon routine, actually, and I thought I'd release it to the public too.
Very cool.
That's me.
Awesome. In the forums, you could probably go there if you're looking for a solution. I'm sure there's people there that can find the app and plugins and things that can get the job done.
Yeah, even if you don't use AudioBus, the AudioBus forum tends to be the place where it's best to go to find really helpful, really nice people. It's a great place.
And then AudioBus 2 and 3 are both available in the App Store. Is 2 there just for compatibility reasons for people that already bought it, or?
I actually retired 2 from the App Store a while ago, but with the advent of AudioBus 3.1, I wanted to make it a discount for existing users. And the only way to do that is to use a bundle which requires the old app to be available for sale. I'm going to be announcing the end of that sale quite soon, so AudioBus 2 won't be available for very long. AudioBus 3 is the
Okay, so don't get confused. Get 3.
Yep, get 3. 3 is the future.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for your time today. It's been great chatting with you.
It's my pleasure. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of iPad Pros. You can find the show notes over at iPadPros.net. You can send your feedback to me at iPadProsPodcast@gmail.com. If you email a voice memo, I'd be happy to include your audio in a future episode. I'm on Twitter at iPadProsPodcast. And as mentioned at the top of the show, if you haven't had a chance to review the show on Apple Podcasts, I highly encourage you to do so. Every review helps send signals to promote the podcast more in search and helps other people discover the show. Thank you for your time and attention today. Talk to everyone again real soon.